Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. No matter where in the world you are, we are happy you are here with us now for this AMEC measurement webinar. I am Jonna Burke, the CEO and Global Managing Director of AMEC, and it is my pleasure to be here with you today as we're talking about back to basics, what good measurement and evaluation really looks like in 2026. It may or may not be what you think it is. So, we are so happy to have you here. And I think this conversation is an important one to always be having and to reviving because as the noise around us gets so much louder around distractions and, the shiny thing running across our screens, it's easy to become untethered to foundational aspects that are best practice, that are the core principles of what good looks like, and how we can bring both the industry, clients, and professionals together around how do we build success. So it is really fantastic to be here. And it's always a pleasure to be here with Maya Koleva, who brings her own perspective to things. She approaches these things as a professional through her day-to-day work, but also as an academic, which I think is something that is such a great blend for us to be able to have Maya with us today. So, a couple of housekeeping items. Thank you for asking. If you have a question, Maya will be taking all of the questions at the end of her presentation. So we're asking you to put them in the Q&A part, and then I will facilitate those for Maya at the conclusion of her presentation. If we've already covered that because it came later in her presentation, if as long as you just post the question when you have it, I'll know that to moderate around that because that's already been answered, or just give a confirmation to everybody. So I think it's important to take a look at this from the lens of where we are. And I think Maya did a great job yesterday of saying, this is not an AI presentation. And I believe I came in and said, actually, everything is sort of an AI presentation because if you don't have this foundation of best practice and what good can look like, you will be lost. You will just accelerate. You will scale bad practice at a terrible rate for both yourself and your organization. So, this is really critical, especially for those people who are scaling AI in your organization. Let's make sure that we're doing it aligned with best practice and what that looks like. So, questions in the Q&A. Please feel free to engage in the chat. We encourage everybody to make this a community and participatory experience. Keeping in mind that Maya is not a robot superhuman, just a regular superhuman, so she can't be talking and moderating the chat at the same time. So that's why we ask you to put those questions for her specifically in the Q&A so we can make sure everybody that has a question has that answered at the end of the session. So enough from me, enough of the tee up. We are joined by Maya Koleva. Thank you so much, Maya, for the generosity of your time and for this session. We always look forward to your insights. Over to you.
Thank you, Jonah. So good to spend my early afternoon here with you, Jonah. I'm exceptionally grateful to you for waking up so early. You look stunning, especially for someone who's at 5 a.m. in her time zone. Um, yeah, I mean, you are the superhuman here. I wouldn't be able to perform at 5 a.m. and deliver a cheerful welcome. But everyone, I'm very pleased to see you here. I see that we have more than 20 people already. I'll be very pleased if you have questions. So let me know. I hope I'll be able to answer everyone's questions at the end. I kind of quickly scanned through the names in the participants list, and I know many of you, and you know me, but there are some people who I haven't met. For your benefit, I'm Maya. And for the past 8 years, I have been both a director in Amex International Board of Directors and the director of research and insight at Commetric. And in my job, I basically help organizations measure what matters in their communications work. And my work sits a bit of the intersection of research and analytics. And I'm rushing, am I not? My work sits at the intersection of research, analytics, and AI. And I'm really passionate about using new technologies, new products, but always through the lens of strong methodology and data integrity. And so today I'll talk to you about why good measurement starts with solid foundations, and regardless of the technology that powers it or scales it. So today's webinar is about something that sounds, I guess, almost unfashionable in 2026, the basics of good measurement. This is not a talk about new tools or platforms or what AI can do next. AI only scales whatever analytical foundation already exists in our practices and in our organizations. If definitions are consistent, AI simply distributes inconsistency faster. And this is going to be a talk about what makes measurement credible, regardless of how advanced the technology becomes. I guess we are operating in a moment of unprecedented capability, right? AI, automation, analytics, dashboards, we've never had more intelligence available to us. And yet, what I see is that many of our clients, many communication teams out there are still asking kind of the same questions. Did this actually work, what we did? Did it make a difference? And the clients I personally work with have never had more capability. And yet still some of them struggle to answer basic questions about what worked, what didn't, and why. So the paradox to me is this: we have more intelligence, but often we have less certainty. And this is why the real risk in 2026 isn't a lack of data or sophistication. I think the risk is confidence outrunning credibility. So basically, when measurement outputs are fast and polished and visually convincing, it becomes very easy to stop questioning what sits underneath them. And this is where measurement quietly becomes fragile. And our objective shouldn't simply be to produce reports. It never has been. It should be building reusable analytical processes that support better decisions repeatedly. And this didn't happen because clients stopped caring about rigor. It happened because basically speed became the priority, didn't it? Tools increasingly shaped the workflows, and AI promised efficiency at an amazing scale. And all of that is perfectly understandable. We all want shortcuts and we all want efficiencies. And if you, like me, work mostly with clients from communication teams, you know well the huge internal pressures that they face from strategy and operations, from procurement, from leadership, and all the other internal stakeholders. And so these shortcuts promised by technology are really understandable, but they slowly disconnect outputs from meaning. And under that pressure, methodology becomes really foundational. So you know what? Before I dive in, I wanted to share something else. So question, is professional best practice measurement always winning in the market? I wish it was, but it is not. Shortcuts are not just easier, they can turn a measurement exercise into vanity window dressing, and all elements can be manipulated to fit someone's agenda. So even if you, like me, have just gone into calmly, professionally, steadily try to educate a client, explain, show, put it all in, sometimes at the end of the day, maybe that's not what they want. So last year I lost a client. It was a client of about 3 years, and we even won several AMEC gold and silvers together for different case studies. But stakeholders changed, and the in-house measurement visionary who I had the pleasure to work with moved on. So I got introduced to a new team. And I had to spend a lot of time explaining what was done before and why, and how it was intended to be used, what decisions it was supposed to inform, but it didn't land. I persisted because I realized the new team did not have the background and the previous one had, and they just needed more time to be trained and onboarded. So I kept on educating, and then I kept on asking those questions around what decisions we need to inform, how do we define success, do we all know where the data comes from, and does it meet data quality standards? So asking and working to build a solid foundation of measurement, right? That's our job. But in the end of the day, out of all things, they decided they will scrap an award-winning integrated measurement program and only report to the board on activities and basic outputs. But this is one of the reasons I wanted to make this webinar, and one of the main reasons we at AMEC do what we do. Even with such discouraging scenarios, being true to yourself, to the discipline, to the best practice, to doing the right thing rather than just jumping into a race to the bottom is what makes us professionals. Am I right? So I will begin with 4 analytical failure points that I have observed, not just from this kind of traumatizing client loss scenario, so I want to start with them. So the first failure point I see again and again is upstream. Measurement begins with a question, and too often that question is vague. Are we tracking performance? Are we showing value? Are we proving impact? But if we can't answer the question, what decisions is this meant to inform? Then I think no amount of sophisticated analysis will fix that later. The second failure point I see, and this is a real pain point for me, is inconsistent definitions. Good measurement often fails before the analysis even begins. It fails at the point of definition. The biggest example, I think, is impact. We all talk about impact, but what exactly do we mean? Impact on what? On whom? And for what purpose? The same problem exists at the metric level. Take sentiment. It's one of the most widely used metrics in communication measurement and one of the least consistently defined. When we say sentiment, what are we actually measuring? Is it emotional tone of coverage, or an attitude towards a brand, or an opinion on an issue, or simply positive versus negative polarity? Each of those reflects a different concept. Each answers a different question. And from a methodological perspective, each should be treated as a different metric. If teams use the same labels to mean different things, comparability is absolutely impossible, right? I jump straight to the third failure point I did. And this failure point sits one layer deeper. It's even when we've agreed on the definition, we still need to understand how a certain metric was produced. What model generated it? What training data was used? How was it validated? And what role did human oversight play? So I think we all know, and we've seen this today, two tools can analyze exactly the same data set and produce materially different results, while both appear perfectly credible on the surface. And that's why transparency matters. If we don't understand how a metric is generated, we can't properly interpret it, challenge it, or defend it. The fourth failure point is not fully understanding the people who use measurement. I think we often talk about the client as if it's one audience, but who actually defines the measurement framework? Who influences buying decisions? Who uses the outputs of reporting? Or who relies on these outputs to make business critical decisions? Those are often completely different people. And one lesson I've learned from consulting is that analysts shouldn't just answer questions. They need to understand how insights are used. So the workflows, the decisions, the pressures, and objectives behind them, because within the same organization, different teams can look at the same data and need very different things from it. And this is why good methodology is more than measurement. It's governance. It creates a common framework for decision making, and it helps different teams reach compatible conclusions instead of creating competing versions of reality. So let's pause here. So looking across all of these failure points, we kind of ask then ourselves, what does good measurement methodology actually require in 2026? And I would argue good measurement in 26 does not require new rules, but it certainly requires renewed discipline, a renewed commitment to professionalism, and a renewed commitment to best practice. This is where the Barcelona principles for all remain not just relevant, but essential. The Barcelona principles don't tell us what tools to use. They tell us how to behave as professionals. And they remind us that good measurement is outcome-focused, methodologically sound, transparent, and ethically defensible. And these principles become more important as technology accelerates. And this is why we must talk more about data quality and not steer away from this topic because it may sound overly academic or even overly technical. Because this is the essence of everything. Data quality, context, shared understanding, they are the foundation of credible measurement. And whether we call it a semantic layer, a shared methodology, or a common measurement framework, organizations need a single place where business concepts are defined consistently before they reach dashboards, report, or AI assistant. Because, right, I mean, if we don't standardize meaning first, we cannot trust the intelligence built on top of it. And since I just said data quality, Jonah, do you want to make a little plug here for the data quality principles and the white paper?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Maya. I love the inclusion of this because it having that foundation piece, if the data isn't good, the decisions can't be accurate, right? And so I think it's one of those areas where this is such an important element. And this was led by Rob Key at Conversian. And we have a work group around this now, including Maya and Reina. And I think it's important because that context piece that Rob talks about, that context engineering that's required to get the most out of the data and to be able to offer up trustworthy, credible, accurate data is increasingly important because there is no shortage of data, right? That's the myth. People like, you don't need more data. People need to be able to understand how to use the data that they have and to be able to do that responsibly. And if you haven't already, Julie has now posted the link to the data quality principles in the chat. Please do download that white paper. Um, it is not a light read, but it is a very important and a good read. I think the exhaustiveness that Rob has covered there really gives everyone kind of, again, when we look at those principles, whether it's the Barcelona principles, whether it's the data quality principles or the geo principles, we're looking for those guardrails. They aren't always exhaustive, but they are giving people who are starting out, they're giving people who work with small teams what are those boundaries? What is the best practice? And then they have a lot of creativity within that, but it's important to be able to operationalize that within their organization and being able to use these as pillars of best practice on a global scale is something that is a great confidence piece for the C-suite. And so we encourage all of you to take a look at this, to be able to cite the work that Rob has done on this piece with attribution appropriately, and to be able to look at this as a way to level up your own context engineering. So, if you're already an advocate, if you're already an ally for a lot of AI pieces, unless you are using those with a great foundation of data, you're likely going to fall under unnecessary scrutiny. And while we see crisis comms creating their own crisis here, there, and everywhere, let's not do that with data. So this is one of those pieces that can help keep us out of the fray. Looking at methodology, looking at that context is really an important piece. Thanks for making that an opportunity for us to talk about it, Maya.
Thank you too, always. So, what is good measurement then? Good measurement is a disciplined way of turning data into decisions that people can trust. Good measurement is not the collection of metrics. It is the creation of trustworthy evidence that helps organizations make better decisions. And in that sense, for me, good measurement is not about producing reports, for sure. It's about creating a trusted foundation for decision making. That means asking the right questions, defining concepts consistently, safeguarding data quality, being transparent about methods, and ensuring that everyone is working from the same evidence. Because that's ultimately what measurement is for. It becomes the foundation of an organization's decision infrastructure. So with this, again, a plug for the AMEC community. This is why we need to work together to educate the market. Many of you know well this diagram of the Integrated Evaluation Framework, the flagship AMEC resource that has been helping comms practitioners measure the effect of their work for over 10 years now. And just a subtle reminder, maybe Jonah, you want to jump in again here real quick to give us a short update of the upcoming 2026 refresh of the IF.
Absolutely. Thank you, Maya. And thank you to everyone who took part in the research that we conducted around what this update is going to be. It's hard to believe that the IEF is 10 years old, but definitely is. And so the team is taking all of the research that we did in the spring and looking at what an update to the IEF is going to look like. And I think, it is important to understand the broad swath of users who use the IEF on a regular basis. Some of those have created then their own forum from that. And I think that's important to understand too. I think, we will see some subtle shifts perhaps within the tool itself if the tool in its current form shape takes place. I think that those are the things that more research with those super users who are using it. We'll go into looking at what those updates will be and how we can then roll those out, hopefully for measurement month, which is everybody's favorite month, as it should be, November 2026. Be there. Because it is important to be part of those conversations. And, you know, it's again a global resource, and so when we are looking at all of those elements that go into creating that decision worthy content, I think there will be some potential subtle shifts, but I don't know that there will be a vive la revolution of a totally different piece of work there. But I think um, we can expect to see some changes based on the early feedback and on looking at kind of where we were 10 years ago, where we are now, and also taking into consideration some of the implications and the iterations that AI will naturally incorporate into the use of such tools.
Absolutely. And so this part of my presentation today is really just a reminder of some of the amazing resources that I use very, very frequently to consult clients and to work with clients and to basically use as a foundation to build solutions for the clients I consult. So some of you are probably just like me and have them all bookmarked and you know them by heart, but bear with me. Couple of slides just to read really a reminder of some things many of you in the kind of AMEC community know, but I hope for some of you in the audience this might be new. So, in addition to the integrated evaluation framework resources, another resource I keep on revisiting is this one. And you can locate it on AMEC's website. This is Professor Jim McNamara's MEL manual. MEL stands for Measurement, Evaluation, and Learning, and a key component that builds on the AMEC integration framework is this emphasis on learning or the application of insights. This is why I keep on bringing the clients I consult back to this question that I labeled as a common failure point. What decision is going to be informed by measurement? What are you going to learn from this? And as much as I like circles, like the previous two diagrams and the way they convey the cyclical nature of communications and by extension, the cyclical nature of measurement and evaluation, I think arguably, at least from my experience, it's much easier to present to clients not this constant loop, but something that conveys a sense of direction, that you're actually going to get somewhere, not just do circles. So this resource is again well known. This is the interactive version of the AMEC integrated evaluation framework. Oh, bear with me. My slides are moving faster than my thought. It's really suitable also for in-house teams. And I strongly recommend this resource. As Jonah said, many users use it regularly, including in-house teams. It's definitely very useful because it also gives you this sense of direction. And this is the exact same idea, even more directional, and it is available in Professor McNamara's MEL manual. So I encourage you to, if you haven't read it, to look at it. And here, again, you can see in that same resource in the MEL manual, this quite simple looking table, which is basically a theory of change model for a company, in this case, one selling motor vehicles. So what I specifically like about it is that unlike the so-called program logic models, which are more chronological, this is built effectively backwards. The end result, the impact you want to achieve, is at the top, and all of the other elements that drive to this impact and contribute to this change are below. So the left columns, reading from the bottom to the top, reflect in some shape and form the customer journey or the audience journey. And they show how communications, as well as potentially other influences, of course, contributes to the impact. So whether recorded as a table, diagram, or simply notes, I think outlining this theory of change is key to mapping a good measurement plan. So this process really involves searching for and studying the evidence that already exists in the organization, including other evidence that needs to be, or data that needs to be additionally procured. And it's basically, it's a scientific approach to a practical problem, but it is not necessarily hard. So you don't have to think you have to read hundreds of pages of academic literature. No, it's really straightforward. And some of those resources are exactly there for this to help you. So let me show you how I use the MEL manual and this concept for a theory of change to help a client from a highly regulated industry set the foundation of a good measurement program for their corporate comms function. So the inputs are the foundation and include obviously all of the research that has gone into audiences, stakeholders, channels, and tactics. Then activities is what the communications, marketing, and external affairs teams do, including things like events, media touchpoints, on-channel activities, press releases, campaigns, whatever it is. And then comes the measurement and evaluation phase, which is a continuous effort in collecting evidence and data. So let's focus on these three stages. So in a good measurement program, I broadly divide the evidence categories in these four main buckets. Information environment or communication performance metrics are a broad category of metrics that we commonly use to measure the outputs of communications or what the communication activities have produced. And they include quantitative and qualitative metrics. So I usually split them, as the name suggests, into these two groups. Group one is the information environment metrics, and they include things like earned media visibility, competitor share of voice, search visibility, LLM visibility, LLM citations, because we're 2026. Group two is communication performance metrics, and they can cover both earned and owned channels. They can include things like message penetration and narrative alignment, entity level sentiment, and then also engagement, click-through, video completion, and audience interactions for owned media. So this category can also include composite scores, and they are quite, I think they're quite trendy nowadays, but those are the scores that would include multiple quantitative and qualitative components within them. Then the awareness layer, often labeled, the metrics there are often labeled outtakes and also can cover some outcomes metric. This is about what audiences noticed, understood, searched for, or engaged with. And metrics here can include kind of more immediate evidence like search data or prompt volumes or evidence from marketing campaigns and other relevant activation. And then we have the evidence category, behavior and reputation layer, I call it, and it refers to the longer term outcomes of communications, things like changes in opinions, attitudes, trust, preference, reputation among key stakeholders. And it is most reliably measured via primary research or changes in, let's say, purchase behavior or other audience behavior evidence. So when we bring, oh, hold on, where is my last layer? And finally, yeah, the impact metrics, of course, they need to be defined by business metrics. And they depend on the nature of the organization, whether commercial or not for profit. So this could include metrics like sales, subscriptions, funding, policy impact, talent attraction or talent retention, share price for listed companies. And these are metrics our clients already have within their organization. They don't need to buy them from somewhere. So when we bring all of this together, we can map out a measurement framework that ladders up evidence from outputs through outcomes and impact. And it can be something like this. And of course, for every organization, it will be slightly different. But what is important is that building a measurement framework is only the beginning. To make it methodologically robust, transparent, and repeatable, we need clarity at every layer of evidence. So not just for every evidence category, but literally for every metric. We should be able to answer at least 3 questions. What does it mean? Where does the data come from? And how is it derived? And that's why good measurement is directly connected to other organizational, something wrong with my animation. So what I mean to say is that good measurement is directly connected to organizational governance and even procurement decisions. The moment we standardize definitions, sources, and methods, measurement becomes more than reporting. It becomes an organizational operating system for decision making. Every evidence category and every metric layer needs documented definitions, agreed data sources, and transparent methodologies. At the simplest level, that means understanding whether a metric is qualitative or quantitative. At the deeper level, it means understanding the models, the tools, and processes that are used to produce it. And why I mentioned procurement? Because procurement decisions matter because they determine which tools, vendors, models, and data sources enter the measurement ecosystem in the first place. And then governance matters because measurement sits at the intersection of many teams, including communications, marketing, data and analytics, leadership. So unless those perspectives are aligned, organizations risk creating multiple versions of reality. And in my experience, successful measurement programs almost always have strong internal ownership. External partners can provide expertise, vendors can provide data and technology, but the framework itself must be owned inside the organization because methodology is ultimately a leadership responsibility, not a technology solution. Technology, AI included, can scale measurement, but only governance can sustain trust in it. And here, this was supposed to reveal the words definition, source, and method, but it's gone. Something happened with the animation, which means that I'm reaching towards the final slides before we can go to Q&A. So looking back at those 4 failure points I started with, notice that none of the solutions are technological, right? They are methodological. If I had to summarize everything good measurement requires in 2026, I would probably narrow it down to these 8 characteristics. So good measurement must be decision-led. It should be built on a theory of change. So it needs to start with this question: what needs to change? What needs to happen? It needs to be based on agreed definitions. It absolutely must be transparent. Hold on, don't be so fast, PowerPoint. It needs to be based on agreed definition. It absolutely must be based on and must be transparent about methods. It should be validated against data quality standards, and it should be used consistently across teams. Of course, it must be connected to outcomes and impact, and it should be designed for learning, not just for reporting. So we have the do's. Now let's look at the don'ts. The common methodological shortcuts I would encourage you to avoid. So don't start with metrics before you clarify what decisions need to be informed. Do not use undefined concepts. Make sure you define them. Don't treat software outputs as self-evident facts unless you really understand the data behind them and the method that is used. Avoid mixing more incompatible data sources. Make sure that they actually make sense together. And don't rush to build fancy dashboards if there is no clear governance on how the dashboards are going to be used and what kind of metrics are going to be included in them. And of course, this is something I think in this community, we've been talking about for probably 20 years now. Don't report activity as business impact. And yeah, we often talk about AI transforming measurement, and I think that's the wrong way around. The organization that will succeed over the next decade won't be the ones with the most technology, according to me. They'll be the ones with the strongest measurement foundation and the smart use of technology. Because when methodology is weak, technology scales noise. Back to you, Jonah. But when methodology is strong, technology scales insight. And that's why in 2026, going back to basics, this is not a step backwards. It's the most future-focused thing we can do. So the future of good measurement is about better questions, better definitions, better data, and better governance. And yeah, we have more intelligence than ever. Our challenge is creating more certainty, and certainty comes from methodology. So if you remember 3 things from today, maybe they could be: start with decisions, not metrics. If no decision changes, measurement is not doing what it should do. Standardize meaning before scaling analysis. You need shared definitions. They are essential and are needed before you launch yet another report or dashboard. And I think trust is now the ultimate KPI. The best measurement systems are not the fastest. They're the ones leaders trust enough to act on. And if they are also fast, then we have nailed it. And thank you. That's all from me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Maya. You know, it's when we talk about the basics, those are foundational piece, but not basic for everyone. And so that's why I think there's always a bit of a misnomer in some of those presentations when it's like they're the basics. It's like, unfortunately, not the broadly adopted basics, but basics to every good program nonetheless. So thank you so much for a great presentation. And I cannot express enough, right? That as everyone is chasing kind of to be an influencer or a thought leader in AI and in some of these other things, without those foundational pieces, it's so vapid, right? It's so meaningless around how to apply that and how they can get traction, scalability, and meaning within organizations. So thank you for compressing that for us so eloquently and so concisely. This could be the best 30 minutes that anybody has spent in a discussion, and I hope everybody agrees to that, but really important. And I love the companion piece of using the Mel framework. I think uh, Jasper, I think, included in the comments about Jim making that open commons. And it really is important. I mean, that is this community in the industry in trying to get everyone on the best footing to be able to make them successful when applying data measurement and evaluation for that credibility and identifying the value of comms, right? Because there's so many elements when we talk about KPIs. And I think we have a great question. I'm going to start with Steph. What would you say is the metric which clients continually ask you to define, explain, even though to us in the industry, the answer might feel so obvious?
I am sad to say that the first thing that comes to mind is impact. Hey, what's my impact? Can you measure my impact? And probably in 7 out of 10 cases, the expectation is to have some sort of a score. And in the others, it probably would be used in exchange for reach. So, and of course, I've had the multiple fortunate engagements where I have managed to have the proper conversation of what do you mean by impact? But I think almost every time I am asked to provide a number for impact. Um, Eventually, I have had to come up with some sort of a impact score or index or whatever that is. So yeah, that would be my answer, Steph. And Phil, I I see you're in the same boat.
So, to Phil, Maya, when your client ended the best practice research program, how did they justify the decision to you? And if you can, who is it for, or the client organization sufficiently joined up to answer that question, if that's appropriate?
Yeah, I mean, I can't name the client, but so the one thing that they kept on saying is that nobody from the board has enough time to understand the complicated integrated measurement framework. And then the other thing was, but we can't say that comms deliver this impact because the field sales would say that they did it. So it was more of a fear to try out proper attribution. And then ultimately, when they had the final decision, they didn't even need to justify it. They just ghosted me.
Sounds
So yeah,
fun.
yeah, this is why I honestly said it was a traumatizing experience.
But I think, the interesting thing is that the IEF can be so helpful in a lot of those attribution requests because when you bring everyone together and understand what are those inputs, what are those activities, what are those elements, it does give you a means to provide attribution to each of the audiences, each of the stakeholders for their contribution based on those activities, based on those outputs, based on those outcomes that are directly driven to that. So I mean, it is an unsung hero of attribution, the way I see the IEF in
Yeah.
any shape or form that it takes. So great. Next question. This is from Jasper. In my experience, organizations frequently first and foremost state their ultimate business goal. We want to be the customer's preferred provider of X service or product, but getting there is usually a journey of many steps, each of which potentially have their own needed business impact and communication objective. How can communicators get to work on the first step in front of them instead of getting frustrated because they cannot see how they can contribute to an ultimate goal far, far into the future?
Well, I saw how one amazing organization that I have the fortune to work with did it. Basically, their organizational and business objectives are definitely quite far into the future. Obviously, the more commercial ones are quite straightforward, measurable. They depend on multiple other factors as well. But the bigger organizational visions, goals are really far-fetched into the future. However, the communication team, the leadership, the communication leadership team managed to define different elements of communication that are going to help this driving reputation, okay, across certain geographies, stakeholders, topics that are relevant to the ultimate business outcomes. So this is why they shifted the request not to measure impact of, let's say, media relations, measure how we improved media quality. It's like, hold on, what's media quality? I'm a former journalist. When you say media quality, I don't think of what you think now. So again, we had a process to clear out the definitions and to understand what exactly they mean. And then ultimately, I ended up coming with an amazing index, but it is an actual proper index that is not designed to measure impact because it's not about impact. It's really about targeted question. Is this something that improves the quality of media coverage from the perspective of this organization in the sense of making it more aligned with their narrative, with their positioning? Is it relevant and accurate for what they want to stand for?
So many follow-up questions to that, like around, why that is increasingly important around the LLMs and everything else that's out there when we're looking at trust and credibility of data, right? It's one of those key feeders to those programs. Um, Final question. It looks like a couple of two questions left. How do you explain to communicators the value of the Barcelona principle in reputation crisis mitigation? What is the importance and the most important metric they need to consider?
These are three questions. So the Barcelona principles, even if I don't specifically say these are the Barcelona principles by AMEC, pretty much all of the professional communicators I have worked with know, subscribe to those professional values. And very few I have ever in my career crossed paths with would say, I need to measure something, but I must be non-transparent and I actually have to completely lie about what. I mean, nobody does that. I mean, I haven't seen that. I know that theoretically some do. I just haven't seen them. Um, so I don't think there is and if I focus on the crisis mitigation aspect, if there is a crisis and a crisis response aspect there, and there is one metric I would focus on, I mean, I guess there would be two. The first metric would be brand level sentiment, but not a simple scale. For many of the crisis prone clients, depending on their industry that I've worked with, I use not straightforward scales like positive, neutral, negative. So it wouldn't be a 3 scale or a 5 scale standard sentiment. It would be either a 4 or a 6 scale sentiment. So this extra is the balance. So balance is like mixed messaging. So in a crisis scenario, I would measure the ratio of purely negative to balanced sentiment because this is effectively crisis response. If it is a negative topic, if it is a crisis, you can't expect to turn a negative into a positive, but turning a negative into something a little bit more balanced, making your viewpoint visible is already a measurable success, measurable contribution of external communications or media relations to reputation. At least you get your statement out. And this is already better than not saying anything. And, in key media coverage to appear something along the lines of the organization refused to comment, or we were trying to reach the organization, but before publication, there was no comment. Both of those are really reputationally damaging statements. You don't want to be there. Um, and then, of course, the other would be alignment, narrative alignment or messaging alignment. And that is your statement is featured, but is it featured in the way you want it to be featured, or is it spun around? Is it ridiculed? And those are the metrics that in a crisis mitigation scenario would make sense for me.
Great. Thank you so much, Maya. So, anything else, Maya, that, obviously you're working with a variety of different clients. Anything that you've seen that strikes you as, you know, this can be really helpful to people broadly without giving away the client's name or something that you've seen that's really good internally that people are doing?
I mean, it's more of a governance question, and I firmly believe that this is not something that is only available as a setup, as a governance setup for multinational companies or large enterprise clients. I think any organization would be able in some way, shape, and form, depending on their scale, size, and budget, to have this internal ownership. If you're just a buyer of measurement, maybe you're not doing it right. There needs to be really internal ownership. Some of the most amazing innovation I have seen comes from in-house teams in the past few years, at least. I've observed also some of the case studies we've seen on the AMEC floor, some of the award-winning work, and this is where I see now the biggest and most exciting innovations. So for any organization to find the suitable for their size and budget setup where there is an internal champion of measurement evaluation, in an ideal world, not just measurement and evaluation, but also strategic insights and integrated analytics. That's, I think, one of the main learnings I've had in the past few years.
And to that end, what are the biggest warning signs that a company has a measurement governance problem?
Well, having measurement as an afterthought is the first big warning sign. If you only think about measurement after your campaign is over and your boss requests to see the results, you have a problem, because this is something you should have done before, way before you have started any activities. And it's critical. And as soon as I see a client or a prospect coming to me saying, I just finished this campaign. Can you do a measurement report? I know that there is a problem.
Yeah, it's a warning sign, right? A lot of people that are very focused on measurement and evaluation, they're still struggling for budget to get buy-in for a more rigorous evaluation, right? Because leadership wants quick answers. So, how do you balance that methodological rigor and the pressure for speed?
Um, with some of the most challenging scenarios that I've had, we do interim results. So these are the metrics, these are the results that can be available now. The next phase would be, let's say, in a month, but then it will take half a year to, or even more, to get to those ultimate evidence that you want to see for, let's say, for behavior change. You can't expect this to happen within a week.
So, while you've talked about the basics here, you also work extensively with AI powered measurement solutions. So, I'll put you on the spot. What's the one thing AI has genuinely improved, and what's the one thing it still can't solve without very strong specific methodology?
Oh gosh. I mean, uh, the scaling up of this external information environment analysis is really amazing. There are solutions, tools, products, providers on the market, multiple that have very, very strong proposition when it comes to uh, entity-oriented search, topic segmentation, risk analysis, mis and disinformation. There's so many, many amazing tools and products. And I mean, if I just would love eventually to find a client that has an unlimited budget to build an amazing stack, because when a client asks me what would you recommend, I want to recommend them so many things. So, but that's, yeah, I'm yet to see that client. But then whenever we reach the point of the really specific stuff that the organization needs, this is where this context layer becomes so, so critical. The own company definitions, the specific requirements, the theory of change model that informs the measurement framework requires. We even think of it as something as straightforward as a metric that we've been using in measurement for so many years, like key message penetration. Um, there are very specific ways and methodologies how to do this right and do it at scale. And there is a possibility to really leverage the use of AI, especially LLMs. But there are limitations to that. And some of those limitations are even related to copyright and compliance. You can't process coverage from most of your key media lists through LLMs. Even if you have a, MCP connection, it's so complicated in terms of licensing and setup. So you have to just be very, very mindful what you offer to the client, what you promise, and what they internally buy in. Do they know, like, have they read the small print, the caveat, what is excluded and why, and how can it be, how can you can manage that. Um, but it is really exciting. I'm definitely quite interested in following closely the launch of the, MCP connectors by many of the major platforms. I think this is the future. But again, it requires the strong internal ownership, especially for those large enterprise clients who really want to take it to the next level, do integrated insights, and just blend data sets with their internal data sets. And yeah, it's definitely a trend to observe closely.
Great. And I think we have one last comment question from Steph, but I think it's an important point and an interesting bridge for us. And says, when we were looking around at my daughter's school back in the day, the headmaster said something that really profound and it stuck with me. Question the question. This is not a question as such, but she wanted to share. And I do think that, that curiosity piece is so critical, right? In understanding what are those KPIs, understanding what are those objectives, what are where that alignment can take hold. So that is a great place for us to wrap. And I think, you know, when you're questioning, it's also never stop learning. And I think there are so many opportunities. First and foremost, the Amex certificate course for getting that certification of what best practice is. And then, no matter if you're working in AI or you're working with a client on their specific initiatives, that consultation and project piece come to life is invaluable to be able to turning around that value piece. And now with the diploma course, and the curriculum was designed by Professor Jim McNamara, it is, in my humble opinion, humble, one of the best courses that is available. Going through that and questioning that theory of change, working from the planning piece truly at the diploma level, is something that when you look at the cost of the diploma course, it is not cheap. But if you think about getting that, paying a consultant to deliver even one person in your team with those skills, you are getting 10x the value of what you are investing, as well as investing in your people, investing in yourself, investing in that education and that credential piece of being able to pull all of those pieces together in those difficult scenarios, like the clients who are too vague, who are abstract. You're able to use all of those tools from those courses to bring them to a solution that they can scale, that there can be confidence, that can be data led. I think, a lot of people will be referring back to the slides that you talked about, that you shared with us, Maya, on the kind of the what to do and the what not to do for those characteristics of good measurement, and then the common methodological shortcuts that you should avoid, right? Because everybody loves a shortcut, not those shortcuts. So I think that's really powerful. And incorporating education, whether it's this webinar, whether it's credentialed courses, or that's right, whether it's the next webinar for AMAC, which is going to be next week with James talking about the AMAC Geo principles, they're live, and now what to do next. I think that is an area where there are a lot of questions and we can deliver a lot of answers. So, how about some reactions for Maya as gratitude for your time, for your expertise? Thank you so much for sharing with us, Maya. Anybody who wants to connect with you outside of the webinar, your preferred way is LinkedIn or
Yeah, LinkedIn is fine. I'm very, very welcome. And also, if anyone would like to have the slides, let me know. I can send them on.
we'll send them with the link to the update that we'll be sharing with everybody who registered and who is watching this live. Those people will receive the links to the slides as well. Julie has now, thank you, published the registration link for the webinar for next week, which is on July 15th at 2 p.m. Thank you again, Maya. We really appreciate you. It's always wonderful to hear from you and to get your experience kind of boiled down and compressed down so people can utilize that and apply that within their own organization with their own teams. So thank you so much. We will be sharing the recording. Everyone who's registered, you will get a link to the recording from the session. So thank you so much, Maya. Thank you everyone for
Thank you.
joining us, for the great questions, for the great conversation, and we will look forward to seeing you next week for our next webinar.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.